Welcome to the Quipster Film Review Podcast. I'm Vince Leo. I am the film critic for the website Quipster.net. Thanks for listening. I hope that you enjoy the review. If you do, I do encourage you to write me and let me know what you think of the show. You can find my contact information from my website, Quipster.net, where you'll also find over 3,800 written film reviews as well to read anytime. Quipster.net, Quipster.net. Today I'm going to be looking at a smaller film. It comes from the UK. It is called Doe. It's a comedy primarily. There are some dramatic elements to it. It's not rated by the MPAA, but I would probably rate it PG-13. It does have a lot of drug content. There's a brief scene of violence, and there are a few bad words here and there. The runtime is 1 hour and 34 minutes. The star of the film is Jonathan Pryce. It also features a sizable supporting role for a relative newcomer, Jerome Holder. Pauline Collins also appears in the film. The director is John Goldschmidt, and the screenplay is by Jez Friedman and Jonathan Benson. Now, Doe, I guess the one unfortunate thing about the film is its title. Obviously, it has a double meaning because the film centers around the world of a baker, but it also happens to be a baker who needs money, as well as an assistant that he takes on, an apprentice who also needs money. So we have the title. It does kind of work, but it's a silly name. And as the film played out, there were some thoughts that ran through my mind about the unfortunate name and what a better title could have been. I guess the most immediate thing that will come to mind is Baked, obviously, because the film is about a baker who ends up selling baked goods that have pot in them. So his customers, who are eager and happy to receive more of it, end up coming back for more. That would have been a great title, I think, but the tagline of the film actually catches on that this is a term for both being high as well as baking, of course. I was also thinking about Breaking Bread because there was the show about the drug dealers Breaking Bad. I guess that connection may go over some heads. I don't know that Breaking Bad was a big hit in England, but perhaps it was. I don't know. But the need for weed, maybe even challah for dollars. Okay, maybe Doe is better than those choices, but Doe is a rather benign comedy. It, underneath all of the pretty formulaic hijinks, it's a subtle call for tolerance and unity among people. Jonathan Pryce is the star. He plays an elderly widower named Nat. Nat is the current owner of the family's century-old Jewish bakery that's just been barely scraping by of late, mostly because his predominantly Jewish clientele are moving away from the East End London neighborhood in which the shop resides. The interiors mostly are filmed in Budapest. There are some exterior shots of that neighborhood. Of course, the clientele is also dying off because most of the people who are left are elderly. When Nat's only assistant leaves for a better paying job, he's stuck having to do it all by himself. Pretty unsuccessfully, he advertises for a new apprentice, but the prospects that he's getting are pretty dismal. And that's bad enough for Nat, who moves slower these days. He's approaching 70. He's woefully out of practice with how to do the baking since he's always had this apprentice. He's just not going to be able to deliver the quality and the quantity that the shop needs to stay afloat. He really feels the squeeze when a greedy developer, who we later come to learn also stole away his baker to work in his shop, he ends up buying the building and wants to push Nat out before the 5 years that are remaining on his lease expire. Nat ends up reluctantly accepting the services of the son of his Muslim African refugee shop cleaner. His name is Ayash, and Ayash mostly is accepting the job because he needs a so-called cover job because he wants to start peddling drugs for a dangerous drug dealer in the neighborhood to make much needed money to help him and his mother get out of the dilapidated slum in which they currently reside. Ayash doesn't have time for both his full-time job and his drug dealing, so he decides that he could do both at the same time while he's working at the bakery, unbeknownst to Nat. When Ayash rashly ends up hiding a stash of weed inside a mixing machine, causing the latest batch of kosher baked goods to give their customers a lift, repeat business begins to pick up for the first time in many years. Seeing this as an opportunity to help both himself and his kindly boss, who would certainly lose his livelihood if the current trajectory of his business continues, Ayash decides that he can kill two birds with one stone by selling his weed within the baked goods and keeping the customers as baked as the items that they purchase. Doe benefits from some pretty solid performances. Jonathan Pryce is delivering the best turn in the film as the frazzled baker who sees all of his hopes and his dreams beginning to slip further away from his flour-coated fingers. Jerome Holder, he's very likable as Ayash, who persistently makes poor life decisions, but does so with the best intentions in mind, such that we continue to root for him, even though his actions are pretty reckless and obviously criminal. I guess the most uneasy aspect to what he's doing is to think that he ends up drugging his boss as well as some of their customers without their knowledge or consent. The movie not only finds humor in the generational divide between the older Nat and the younger Ayash, and the racial one is there in a more minor sense anyway, but it also navigates some pretty tricky religious friction and prejudices that have plagued the Jewish and Muslim communities in London for a while now. The fact that Doe comes across as old-fashioned probably won't come as a surprise when you learn that John Goldschmidt, the director, hasn't actually helmed anything in nearly 30 years. His last effort came in 1987. It's also the first feature screenplay for the screenwriter Jez Friedman. Jez Friedman created a short film called The Funeral back in 2013. That was executive produced by the director of this film, Goldschmidt, and also first-timer Jonathan Benson. The tone of the film's a bit loose. It's occasionally stiff, but I do think that the performances elevate the characters such that we end up liking them well enough that we want to see what happens for them in the end. We have a rooting interest. And contrivances do abound within the plot, most notably when the two protagonists end up having to don disguises and break into a corporate headquarters to save their livelihoods. You know, that seems so far-fetched compared to the rest of the film, but the movie seems to be made mostly as a piece of fluffy, innocuous entertainment anyway, so such an indulgence manages to not sink the film into being a complete misfire. It's all pretty genial, all in all. Doe does begin to weaken somewhat when the secondary plots kick in. They involve the bullying tactics of both the wicked developer as well as the dangerous drug dealer. That ends up bringing such things as silly heist elements and moments of potential tragedy for the shop that don't really quite jive with the more modest and lighthearted setup of the first hour of the story. If you're worried that things are starting to seem a bit dour for the last half hour of the movie, I would say don't worry. This is a formula film that is as warm as a room full of ovens. It fully intends to leave you walking out of the theater with a smile, which I think that, generally speaking, if you're on board by that point, you will do. It is a sitcom premise. It plays mostly like one throughout. But there's enough sweetness and there are some modest laughs, and that makes for a pleasant diversion for those viewers looking for a very light look at how our differences as people aren't really as strong as our similarities despite generational and cultural and ethnic and religious divides. I'm giving Doe 3 stars out of 4, and 3 stars on my scale means that if you're looking for a comedy that has some serious subtext underneath that allows you to look at some pretty serious issues, the friction that exists between people of religious or cultural or religious or generational clashes, then I think that you'll probably find that the message is delivered with a lot of sugar, makes it go down easy, and you'll probably end up enjoying it and getting the message underneath it as well. 3 stars out of 4 for Doe. Thanks everyone for listening. I do hope that you enjoyed this review. If you did, I do encourage you to click the subscribe button and you'll continue to get all of my reviews throughout the course of the year. Blockbusters, independent films, foreign films, things going straight to VOD, as well as streaming services are all on the agenda. Whatever I think that you would enjoy hearing about is going to be talked about on this show. Also, if you happen to be there, I do encourage you to leave a review if you happen to want to support the show, because I do rely on word of mouth to get the word out there that this is a show worth checking out if you're a lover of films. Also, don't forget to check out my website at quipster.net, QWIPSTER.net. Until next time, thanks everyone for listening, and I hope that you truly enjoy your time anytime you get to go to the movies.